Welcome back to the test server, boys. It's here once again, and girls, not to forget, around 1.7% of my viewers right now are girls, so you know this one goes out to you. We're here to talk about the test server today. There is a lot of canon changes coming, and I have been streaming the test server now for a couple hours, trying to get an overview of what I think of all of this. So I think it's a pretty good idea to sum it all up here in a video now. If you have been living under a rock for the past couple of days, probably just days, then you will know that there has been some quite severe changes to cannons. At first, there was some speculation whether this was going to be all cannons would be acting like prosecutor and executioner, but we finally have some more clarification of exactly what this is. We're working with two terms here: shrapnel damage and explosion radius. What we're going to see then is that take this red circle that we have right here. This red circle will present our explosion radius. The shrapnel damage within this explosion radius is somewhat the damage scaled out the further away from the center of impact that you get. So in this white circle, if you have 100% damage, then the shrapnel damage out here would maybe be 80%, and the shrapnel damage here would be 60, and the shrapnel damage here would be 40. That is what I think that we concluded on this stream was, you know, the thing that they wanted to get through with this. So the damage, the AoE damage seems to have been changed, where the explosion radius seems to have increased. Now this means one of two things. If we have more of these sort of steps, you know, scaling outwards, if we scale out further, then the next damage wave, represented by the red one here, will actually have higher damage than in here. So once you get closer to the center of impact, but not at 100%, you will actually have higher damage because the scale becomes bigger, because we might have the explosion happening all the way out here rather than just here. So you see what I mean? If we have 100% here and a 0% here, but now we have 0% here, then this point right here will actually have higher damage than before because it scales in a longer distance. That is worth noting when we talk about all of this. And having said that, let's just quickly start by talking about the changes to the cannons. For Avenger and Judge, our common and our rare fixed angle cannon, we will only have shrapnel and explosion radius changes. 60% reduced shrapnel damage, so lower damage for AoE, but on the other hand also a bigger AoE, so a bigger total explosion radius. That counts for those two. When we go to the prosecutor, we will also see energy consumption increased from 5 to 6 units. Besides that, also power score increase because of the energy change. We also have shrapnel damage reduced by 56% on this, and explosion radius increased by 22. For the executioner, again, energy and power score, and then we have shrapnel damage reduced by 47, explosion radius increased by 20%. Worth noting here is that executioner still has its perk, armor piercing projectiles exploding after armor penetration of 80 parts, or not 80 parts, wow, that's a lot of parts, 80 centimeters. So if we slap on 2, we know we actually just need 1 executioner for this, so that's perfectly fine. But if we slap on 1 executioner for this, let me show you what this exactly means. If I shot this side with a regular cannon, for example a Tsunami, all of this would fall apart. But watch what happens if I shoot this with an executioner. As you can see, we actually only leave a somewhat small hole here. But if we go to the other side, the entire side of the panels are gone. The reason that this happens is because 80 centimeters is equaling to around 2.5 layers of armor. So the explosion happens within the build itself. When we shoot right here, let's see if we can shoot just this window. There we go. As you can see, nothing much falls off there, but on the other side, we all have taken off just a bit more there with some more armor falling off, because the explosion happens further to that side of the wall because of, you know, the explosion perk of the executioner and the prosecutor. So that perk will not go to the other builds. Very important, that perk will not go to all builds. That's not what they mean by it. The explosion still happens where you shoot if you shoot with the Tsunami or the Typhoon. The explosion still happens exactly where you shoot. The only thing that has changed is the fact that we now have a bigger explosion radius, but less damage inside of that explosion. So if we shoot here, bam, everything falls off because this cannon deals more damage, and because of that, the explosion is just, you know, quite severe on a tiny build like that, but all over. It doesn't pierce through and then explode. Good. Having covered that, then we have the Tsunami, which receives damage reduction 60% in the inside the AoE, but has a bigger AoE of 35%. And then we have a new perk. Every 2 seconds of immobility increases damage by 5%. The effect stacks up to 4 times. So as you can see now, the Tsunami actually charges really fast all of a sudden. Like, really fast. There we go. And we have ourselves 4 stacks, meaning that our Tsunamis will now deal more damage. That's also pretty cool. That's also pretty cool. 456. So in total, I actually don't think that we will see much damage difference on the Tsunami. The base damage seems to be the same still. We're just getting less damage per stack, only 5% now, but we can on the other hand also stack 4 times instead of 3. So you won't have to sit around for as long, making the perk so much more viable. And I personally think that Tsunami Spiders might actually be funny for you guys if you don't have relics and you just have legendaries. Tsunami Spiders might actually very well be a thing, again, because of the fact that you get that quicker charging. So it can actually, you know, it matters to just sit around with your spider and you don't have to sit around for 30 seconds in order to get all of your charges. So that's a very welcome change in my opinion. Then we also have the Typhoon, which receives the same shrapnel damage reduced by 60% and explosion radius increased by 35%. Changed the perk, and this one, oh, that's the only one, you know, that's actually a real bummer to me in my opinion. I do not support this change at all whatsoever. Like, the Tsunami is a cannon that was unique because of the stun, so I do not think it's the right move to remove it. The stun is not the cause of the issue with this cannon. The alpha damage of the Typhoon is the issue with this cannon, and the alpha damage on this cannon is not being changed. This cannon still hits for 240 damage per pop. So if we hit here, well then, you know, we should kind of hit for 480 if we can actually get the cannons to zoom in. We hit for 445 for some reason. That's quite interesting. Wait, did I said 240, right? Yeah, I said 240. And then what? Okay. This is me having a damage reduction cabin on this thing again. Yeah, I do. So that's because I have an icebox on here right now that has damage reduction on it. Yeah, 10% damage reduction. So if we didn't have that, then we wouldn't subtract, you know, that damage from our hit, and then it would be 240 per shot. Having said that, though, as I was saying, now we're increasing reload times whenever we hit people with a perk. The stun was what was making people be really good at playing the Typhoon or mediocre at playing the Typhoon, because this doesn't change anything for the hover teams. This doesn't change anything for Typhoon teams. Typhoons will still be equally dominant when it comes to damage. That's one thing. But, for example, this doesn't all of a sudden revolutionize our Clan Wars world and makes everyone go for Scorpions, in my opinion, because people at the end of the day should play Typhoons for the damage, not the perk. Because if you have a full Typhoon hover team and you single out people, which you should always do, then the stun is not gonna matter. If you push into people, 4 people, and you try to hammer them down, and you all have Typhoon hovers, then once you have 3 Typhoons who shot that dude, he's not gonna get stunned anymore anyways, and then it's all about the damage. And the alpha damage hasn't changed. So if you have 5 people rushing in, you're still gonna take 2000 cabin damage like this if you're getting trained by 4 Typhoon hovers. So that doesn't change anything at all. Is this necessarily bad? No, because yes, the Typhoon is in a strong state and it is more dominant than other cannons, but they have to look at the alpha damage. It doesn't matter changing the explosion radius when they didn't change it more than they did. We tested it in my live stream. You can go watch the recap. The damage is not very different. The only thing it changes really is if you have these 6 plates, and I shoot here, then we're gonna take off those 3, and then the next 3 here, these will actually have pretty much the same HP left as they do on the live server right now, if you want to take those off afterwards. So it doesn't change that much. And the perk was what was making some people good at playing Typhoons and some people bad at playing Typhoons. Because one thing about the Typhoons, if you want to throw people off, you can always shoot them at the front, because that sends people's builds spinning. And once you send them spinning, then they cannot recover because they're stunned. But then you also have people who just, bam, shoot straight into builds, and that thing has a gas gun, so it blows up. So, you know, kind of a terrible example. But you just shoot them in the front, and then you don't really do much to them. But if you want to distract someone, you know, some people actually develop tactics of shooting at specific parts of builds, making people easier to take out. Some of you guys, though, will probably be happy to see this change, because it's a common setup to have light frames on your hovers and have maybe your explosive hidden underneath and stuff like that. The increased explosion radius will make it so much easier for you. I don't even know if I can prove this on the test server because of the simple fact that these hovers are a bit broken. But I think I can pop this build in one hit. Yep, I can. And that has been made so much easier with the changes to the explosion radius. The reason that this happens is, and it's a common technique when playing hovers that you do this, but you basically shoot the ground here. So when you shoot the ground, then the explosion radius impacts onto his build. As you can see, we shot the ground and still we took off most of it. And I think we can actually take off pretty much the entire front if we shoot right around there. There we go. Yep. A lot of his hovers there on the front just fell off, and most of his frames came off as well. So that build now has no more frames at all in the front, and we haven't even shot it. We just shot the ground. And that's a pretty common technique when you're playing cannons, and it's going to be so much easier now. Like, it's just going to be shoot the ground, shoot the ground, shoot the ground most of the time if you are facing enemy hovers, because it will be so easy to take people out that way because of the increased explosion radius. So all in all, no Typhoons. This doesn't change much. I think it's sad to see that this is the change that they're getting. Again, I'm not saying that they're stupidly OP or anything like that. They are by far the most meta thing we have. Like, they're on top of the scale, but they're not breaking the scale, so to say. There is a lot of different things that we can look at before we start looking too much at the Typhoon. The perk was not the right way to go, in my opinion, and I hope we can talk about this. For the Executioner, you might have seen some of my live streams lately where I've been playing this specific Executioner hover. And this specific Executioner hover I have been having very well amounts of success with. And I honestly think it's fair enough that they changed the Executioner to 6 energy. I also do think that they should give it some more HP and maybe just, you know, see if they could update the model and give it a less bulky profile, make it a bit more streamlined. I know it's supposed to be based on the 88mm flak gun by the Germans used in the Second World War, and that thing is massive. But there are ways that they could have given this just a tiny less profile. Just a little less, to make it less bulky. Because if you only play 2 of these, then you simply cannot afford to lose them as quickly as you would otherwise do. And if you compare them to, for example, the Prosecutor and the Judge and the Avenger, then the profile is actually also quite big. It's quite severe compared to those. So while the alpha damage on 3 Executioners are just insane, like it's so big, I also still think that they should compensate for the fact that we're only getting 2 cannons. So nice change. Nevertheless, I'm gonna miss my triple Executioner hover so much. I'm literally crying inside right now as I am saying this. But I see why it's necessary. The alpha damage is insane. Besides that, we also... I've said besides that so much. Can someone make it besides that counter, please, in chat? That would be amazing. We also have changes to turret cannons, or tower cannons, as they like to call them in the update notes. All of those cannons are getting changes to their shrapnel damage and explosion radiuses as well. The interesting change here, and the change that I think will make mammoths great again and potentially also be very, very strong for future builds, well, that is the fact that the mammoth has had 2 quite, or that's for all tower cannons, but basically maximum spread in motion reduced by 13%. The spread when turning the tower is reduced by 20%. So we're getting way less spread on the mammoths, meaning that these guns are going to be very precise. Like, very precise. I don't even have my mammoth over here that I use for clan wars, but that thing is going to be insane. Because on top of that, they also slapped on 10% more durability to this thing. I think it's around 1130 something on the live service here, 1284. That's 4.5 direct scorpion shots onto it. if you're fighting a Scorpion, 2 shots directly onto 1 gun, he can't even strip 1 gun, like a dual Scorpion. He can't even strip 1 gun. Yes, 2 shots from that's quite a lot. That's quite a lot, and I honestly welcome it. I think it's so dope. I think it's a great change. I love mammoths, and I think it's nice to see that they're actually getting some love. So very welcome change indeed, and this is the same for all turret cannons. So elephants, fat mans, Hulk, and little boys, everyone is getting some extra bonuses to them. And durability is 10% for all of them. The spread is also the same for all of them. And then the explosion radius and shrapnel damage is also pretty much the same for all of them. 40% shrapnel damage reduction and explosion radius increased by 33%. Worth noting is that the Mammoth has a pretty severe explosion radius already. So those 33% will do it some good, some really good. Finally, we also have some changes to missiles, which is the Wasp, Locust, Cricket, Pyre, Hurricane. All of those will be getting shrapnel damage reduced by 15%, so all of them will get less AoE damage, and that's about it. And that's also it for Quasar and Pulsar. So nothing drastic on the Pulsar and the Quasar. The Pulsar just deals a little bit less AoE damage, and that is a very welcome change indeed. Like, the Pulsar has insane amounts of AoE, so I think it's nice to see, to say the least. But where does this take us in the future? I honestly don't think it takes us anywhere. You might have also noticed that the hovers are broken. Do not panic sell your hovers. It's not supposed to be like this. Hovers have a tendency to be broken once you're in the test server. So we will probably see a dev statement within a couple of hours, maybe tomorrow, stating that hovers are not, you know, supposed to be like this, and they will not be like that when this patch drops. Having said that, I don't think this changes much. So like I said, don't panic sell all your stuff. Don't panic sell your Typhoons. Don't switch them out for anything else, because it's still meta. It's still meta. I keep my money on the fact that we need to see changes to the alpha damage in order to really touch the Typhoon. So I think that's where we're gonna put our money. Meanwhile, I think I'm also gonna whip out a melee once again, because life as a melee player might have gotten a bit easier with the Typhoon changes. The interesting thing, just as a final comment here, is the reload thingy. So I wonder if there will be ways that you can counter that reload debuff, maybe by bringing in machine guns again, or maybe by bringing in the Helios again, because if the Helios change also lands, then you won't have to think about your cycle, you know, the way that you cycle your Helios. So those will be essentially quite effective, and you won't be affected by the Typhoon debuff. So at the end of the day, possibly this might widen our view on the way that we see meta in a month or so, when this patch has been launched and is live and everything. We'll have to see. Nevertheless, thank you so much for tuning into the video, guys. I really appreciate you watching this, and I hope that you could use this and the live stream if you were there. As always, an amazing live stream, 150 people. I really am grateful for you guys being there. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.